Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. A lot to get to on a very busy Tuesday evening. Multiple rallies tonight pushing thousands of people into the streets of Toronto and Mississauga in response to escalating violence in the Middle East. Today, an airstrike hit a hospital in Gaza, killing at least 500 people. We'll show you the aftermath of the brutal violence in just a moment. But first, to Yonge and Bloor, where thousands of Palestinian supporters shut down roads around Toronto's Israeli consulate. The demonstration was organized by the Palestinian Youth Movement. Toronto Riot Squad was on scene as a precaution, but police say the demonstration was large and loud, but remained peaceful. People were seen climbing what looks like scaffolding near the busy Toronto intersection. And this was the scene just a few moments ago. As you can see, crowds had dissipated and the roads in the area have now started to reopen, though this one clearly still closed off. There are no reports of violence, but police saying late tonight one person has been arrested. It is unclear what they allegedly did or if they're facing any charges. Meanwhile, organizers say, especially with today's escalation of violence in Gaza, they wanted to show their support for the Palestinian people.
We have thousands of people here today, of Palestinians, Arabs, and allies who are here to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza and to stand in unequivocal support of the breaking of the siege of Gaza, of allowing humanitarian aid to enter into Gaza, and for a ceasefire.
Meanwhile, over at the University of Toronto, tensions were escalating earlier tonight at a rally held on the steps of Sydney Smith Hall. That one was organized in collaboration with members of U of T's Jewish community, dubbed a unity rally, expressing solidarity and support for Israel. But as you can see, it quickly became heated as pro-Palestinian demonstrators showed up. No reports of arrests or violence at this rally, though there was a heavy police presence physically separating the two sides.
The counter-protesters came out and started, chanting and, making a mess, and that's their right, and I support that fully. They have the right to do that, but they came out here, and really that's where we are at this point, right? We're representing our views, we're representing, our solidarity with Israel. We're taking a strong stance on campus and showing that there is a Zionist and Jewish presence here on campus, and it's here to stay, and that's the main idea, really.
In a statement to CBC Toronto tonight, U of T says anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, hate, and discrimination of any kind have no place on our campuses or anywhere else. The statement goes on to say that campus safety is working with Toronto Police, and the university will act swiftly to protect and support the community. Now shifting to what actually happened today in Gaza and that airstrike that hit a hospital, killing at least 500 people. Now, as we show you this video, just a warning, it contains some disturbing images. All right, so more than 500 people killed, and those wounded in the attack were reportedly rushed to another hospital about 1.5 kilometers away. The Israeli military says it believes the hospital was hit by a rocket that was misfired from Hamas from inside Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denies Israel is responsible. He says, quote, "It was barbaric terrorists in Gaza that attacked the hospital." Meanwhile, Hamas blames Israel for the airstrike. Aid workers in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have pushed the territory to the brink of collapse. At least 600,000 people have fled northern Gaza for the south after warnings from Israel. Food, water, fuel, and medical supplies are all running out. An Israeli attack earlier in the day is reported to have killed 27 people in Rafah, in southern Gaza, at the main border crossing with Egypt. And on the other side of the Rafah crossing, truckloads of aid are lined up waiting for clearance to travel into Gaza. So with all those challenges trying to get aid into the region, many people here in the GTA are desperate to help. Tyler Cheese picks up that part of our coverage tonight.
For the past week and a half, the UJA Federation of Greater Toronto has been gathering donations and supplies to send to Israel.
We've been able to raise $54 million from more than 7,000 community members to provide humanitarian aid to Israelis who are hurting.
He says the money raised will go toward things like mental health supports, protective gear, and emergency medical kits for first responders. The organization has also already shipped a plane full of supplies like these to the war-torn region.
One of the things our partners have said is that they need more medical supplies, and that was our first priority. Things like medical supplies such as gauze, bandages, polysporin, Advil, but also basic goods like socks, underwear.
And donations are still coming in. Meanwhile, Global Medic in Etobicoke has been focusing its efforts on Gaza. They say the lack of access to the region is the biggest problem.
There's 2.3 million people that are in trouble, and every minute that passes, like just even the time that I'm talking to you about this, they're in more trouble.
Global Medic is currently shipping kits to Egypt, but with the border crossing into Gaza still closed, there's no way to get them to the people who need them. That's why so many, including Canadian officials, are calling on Israel to allow humanitarian access to Gaza.
The bottom line is that these people are under bombardment. They are suffering not only death, but illness. Hospitals are short of medicines. Hospitals are short of electricity. They're short of food. And we need a humanitarian corridor to get those supplies in as fast as possible.
Though political tensions are still very high in the Middle East, both organizations we spoke to say the most important thing is getting help to those who need it.
Our focus is first and foremost on the humanitarian needs.
The 4-year-old child that doesn't have clean drinking water right now, they didn't take a side in this war, but they're getting affected by it. And that's the folks that we really want to save.
Last week, the federal government pledged $10 million in funding for humanitarian assistance. How that money will be allocated has yet to be announced. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
We have an update now on our top story from yesterday. After last night's written apology, today the CEO of the Markham Public Library apologized at a press conference after an email sent to staff was made public. Now, the email asked for the removal of displays commemorating Islamic Heritage Month, given the ongoing violence in the Middle East. Greg Ross has that story.
This was an email essentially telling staff at multiple libraries to remove displays commemorating Islamic Heritage Month as a result of tensions in the Middle East. Here is a direct quote from that email. It said, "Given the current situation in the Middle East, it is best for us not to be actively promoting Islamic Heritage Month." It went on to say, this will be perceived as we are taking a particular side. Now, today, the CEO of the Markham Public Library, Catherine Biss, said that this email was sent out prematurely. She said that they had received some complaints from community members that they wanted to address, and that they decided to temporarily remove those displays while they reviewed those complaints.
While we were evaluating, we followed our normal protocol to remove the displays until the review was completed. In retrospect, while we were following our normal process, I want to apologize for the confusion and the hurt that this has caused. We support the staff and the community who are experiencing trauma and grieving the loss of life in the Middle East.
Bliss says now all of those displays have been put back up in libraries and will remain up until the end of October. She says that the library is going to conduct a thorough investigation and review of its policies and practices when dealing with situations like this. But the explanation is not necessarily sitting well with everyone. We spoke to a Muslim woman who brings her 2 children here to this library. Here was her reaction to this statement from the CEO.
I mean, the irony of it is it's Islamic Heritage Month, right? So it's a time to celebrate and learn and understand about Islam. And instead of taking that opportunity, they kind of gave into, okay, so the Muslim existence is offensive to somebody else, so therefore let's just eliminate it. And again, they're furthering Islamophobia.
The National Council of Canadian Muslims is also calling for an investigation into this email and how it was handled. We spoke with the Director of Communications.
To see a body within the community that is supposed to educate, to protect, and to provide a safe space, go through a decision process this quickly, this swiftly, and come out with a decision to remove books that essentially do not have anything to do with the political situation or the conflict that is happening. Many in the community are just asking why.
Now, we also reached out to the mayor's office today. We wanted to get reaction to this, but we also wanted to see if the city would be conducting any kind of investigation into this. The mayor was not available to talk to us today.
That was Greg Ross reporting from Markham for us. Now over to Queen's Park, where politicians debated a motion today to condemn Hamas's attack on Israel. But some wanted the statement to also include recognition for the plight of the people in Gaza. For that story, let's turn to Lorenda Redekop.
As the tragedy and violence continues to unfold in the Middle East, 10 days after the Hamas attack on Israel, the Ontario government introduced this motion.
Condemn the ongoing and reprehensible attacks being carried out by the terrorist organization Hamas.
The motion also calls to recognize Israel's right to defend itself.
We watched in horror as children, the elderly, even Holocaust survivors were stolen, beaten, and slaughtered at the hands of Hamas.
The opposition wanted an amendment to also recognize the suffering in Gaza.
The Palestinian people are also suffering for those acts of terror.
It doesn't just harm the one side, and their action has also hurt Palestinians.
But it was ruled out of order, as other amendments by the government were already being considered.
I would like to see us talking about ceasefire and supporting the work that's needed. This motion doesn't do that, and in not addressing some of these other things, I think it risks really dividing communities against each other.
Her party is dealing with its own political issue connected to the conflict. In a social media post last week, the NDP's Sarah Jama initially only talked about the harm to those in Gaza. The MPP's husband is Palestinian. Jama later apologized and added to her initial post that she unequivocally condemns terrorism by Hamas. But the government has another motion ready, asking the Speaker to censure her until she takes down the post altogether and apologizes in the House.
They're taking a very drastic measure and bringing forward a motion intended to take away her right to speak in the legislature on behalf of her constituents.
The interim Liberal leader also wants the post gone, something Marit Stiles had initially called for.
Retract the thing that caused the harm and the hurt. It'll take 3 seconds on a smartphone.
Debate on that motion is expected to start tomorrow morning. The vote on the other motion, condemning Hamas and supporting Israel, is expected later this week. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, so clearly so many threads to this story. It's hard to keep track, but our website has it all for you on the latest that is ongoing in the Middle East. You can head there anytime to our website at cbc.ca/Toronto. And it is 11 degrees as we look live at the city skyline right now. Colette Kennedy is with us for a first look at the forecast. Colette, it was certainly a beautiful day where I was today, but not the case, I gather, for everybody in our region.
Yeah, Chris, that's right. It almost made you feel a little unlucky if you were in some of the areas where the conditions were very different with more cloud cover, and then other areas where, yeah, plenty of sunshine. So it really was sort of split through much of the day. And you can kind of see that with the temperatures. I mean, they tell the story where we had some milder readings in the mid-teens, Toronto, Oshawa, Peterborough, and it was around the west end of Lake Ontario. Some of the clouds were more stubborn, a little cooler there for Hamilton, and some cooler readings for you back into southwestern Ontario, 11, the daytime high there for Windsor. And as we move forward, we're seeing a principal change in the direction of our winds. So today, they earlier still had that kind of northwesterly component and then switched around to more of a southerly component. So the lake effect shifts to this area. It does mean a slight chance through the Niagara region and along the north shore of Lake Erie could have an isolated shower, not just tonight, but even early tomorrow morning. But then after that, we get into some fair conditions through the day tomorrow. And Chris, we are going to see some nice readings on the thermometers as well as we're headed to a high of 16.
My goodness. All right. Thank you, Colette. We'll talk to you again in a few. So another late season warm spell, but in the weeks ahead, of course, the temperature will drop. And tonight, the city is focusing on its plan for people experiencing homelessness this year, filled with so many added stressors, including a large number of still unhoused refugee claimants. Dale Manukduk looks into how the city is planning to respond and why advocates worry it's not even close to enough.
Accessing Toronto's shelter system can be deflating for people working the front lines alongside the unhoused.
There will be many nights where we will call for a shelter bed and there will be nothing available, and the best that I can do is offer a warm sleeping bag or a Tim Hortons card to find a 24-hour Tim Hortons to stay warm.
Currently, the city is sheltering 10,700 people, and every night it turns away 275 more.
We have never faced this kind of challenge before. I mean, you know, the fact that we're sheltering more than 10,000 people in the city is, you know, marks an unfortunate, new level of service.
The city says this winter it's adding 180 additional shelter spaces.
It's not even close to being enough, and those aren't even like new facilities. What they're doing is they're cramming beds even closer together, less than a meter apart, to make those spaces available.
The city moved beds further apart during the COVID-19 pandemic and is returning to a closer distance. It's also adding 40 spaces at a 24-hour winter respite site and a total of 275 new housing opportunities. But even with those additions, the city knows it needs even more space.
I just want to put out an open call to all partners in the city, business community, institutions, other orders of government with public lands. Come on board, help out, because we need every partner in this city to meet the need. And I want to say your city needs you right now.
It's especially calling on the federal government to help with the refugee crisis. For months, many have camped outside the city's assessment and referral center, and even though the feds have moved hundreds to other locations over the last few weeks, more show up every single day.
Right now, there's not a centralized place for them to go. So what do? Some go to a church, some come to Peter Street, some don't know where to go, and that's unacceptable. We need a reception center that we can properly support and fund, and we'll partner with the federal government to do that.
Dale Monukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Public Health is looking ahead to the winter as well, today seeking millions more in funding from the province ahead of what is expected to be a difficult respiratory virus season. The $5 million funding boost being sought would be used to pay for more infection prevention measures in long-term care homes and shelters. Toronto's public health chair says data suggests a tough flu season is likely this year, and officials want to put additional protections in place for vulnerable populations. The funding request still needs to be endorsed by the Board of Health. That's expected at a meeting next week. Stay with us. Welcome back. A Windsor courtroom was the scene again today of some disturbing testimony in a high-profile murder trial. Nathaniel Veltman stands accused of driving his truck into a Muslim family in 2021. Today, he testified in court that he had felt an urge to hit them. The 22-year-old is charged with murder motivated by terrorism, but has pleaded not guilty. Thomas Dagla is following the trial for us.
Pacing in his jail cell after his arrest, Nathaniel Veltman said he racked his brain to find any justification for his deadly attack on a Muslim family. His defense team is now seeking to undercut this confession to police.
I'm not planning on claiming that I was in a psychotic state, or I want the world to know why I did what I did.
Twice that weekend in June 2021, Veltman said he drove by groups of Muslims and considered running them over, experiencing what he described as a dream-like state, dealing with depression and reeling from the effects of magic mushrooms. When he came upon the Afzal family, the accused told the court the urge to act came on too strong. My mind was a mess, he said. I turned around, stepped on the gas, and drove at them. Within minutes, Veltman's truck was seen pulling into this shopping mall parking lot. He said he again spotted Muslims and considered attacking them too. But instead, he got on his knees and waited for police, fearing, he said, someone else might get hurt. Now 22 years old, Veltman is charged with terrorism-motivated first-degree murder and attempted murder. In Superior Court in Windsor, he's spent 4 days testifying in his own defense. Veltman's lawyers are trying to show the attack wasn't premeditated and the accused had no intention to kill. What was your intention? Defense lawyer Christopher Hicks asked in court. To crash into them, Veltman simply replied. Did you intend to kill? I just had this urge to crash into them, he said.
There may not be a lot to lose by him testifying, and he may be the only source of evidence that could potentially get this down to a second degree.
Asked before the jury whether he feels remorse for what happened, Veltman replied, yes, I know that it was horrible. Thomas Dagla, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, Colette, lots of heavy news in the show tonight, but your forecast is giving us a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, I did finish off on a high note, didn't I, Chris, with the end of that first weather. And so now we're going to kind of take you a little bit deeper into the forecast period and show you how long things are going to be lasting in terms of some of this fair weather. Okay, it's on tap for Wednesday, so we have a nice conditions there. Yeah, it's Thursday or a little earlier, southwestern Ontario. Those things will be changing, and then it will move towards the Golden Horseshoe. So I'll show you how that plays out. But we do have a few days where our temperatures are a little bit above normal, so a little mild, kind of mid-teens here for a few days before they dip as we get towards the weekend. So we are looking at a few little isolated showers there from the Niagara region over along the north shore of Lake Erie, mostly though in the east end, and then towards the Kingston area you see a little sprinkles too, but otherwise kind of fair weather clouds, so a little bit of cumulus mixing in with your sunshine, but sunshine is the important thing in there. So we will have some of that with those variable skies tomorrow. And then here you go Thursday. This model's coming in a little more quickly than, say, the Canadian model. So still it looks like morning hours for southwestern Ontario. And here it's already into the GTA as we get into the early afternoon. That may hold off to more towards evening. So we'll keep fine-tuning that timing for you. But just know Thursday's a day with changing conditions here, and you'll need the umbrella. Some of the overnight lows, just to have a look at those. And speaking of, okay, not necessarily the lows, but the temperature right around heading towards the bus stop, about 7 degrees tomorrow with more sunshine. And then as we are heading home, 15 degrees, a few more clouds mixing in there. Playtime. Hopefully your parents let you play outdoors. Well, hey, the kids aren't up now. Okay, parents, hopefully you let the kids play outdoors a little bit before they have to get to that homework. 16 the high for Wednesday, Thursday 16 as well. And then you see as we go into the weekend, Chris, where that kind of cool down starts to come in.
All right. Thanks, Colette. And we'll be right back. Finally, tonight, Pearson introduced new AI technology that'll help improve service at the airport.
Real-time alerts and notifications for us to be able to remediate. So, for instance, it can detect and look for hazards such as holes in our fence lines that may need to be repaired, or possibly unwanted debris that may be in our runways that need to be cleared.
An autonomous airfield inspection vehicle was showcased today, and they say it'll help keep airport runways, taxiways, and security fences safe. The vehicle is electric and emissions-free, and the pilot project is in collaboration with Honda, Cisco, Illuminex AI, GenWave, and Eagle Aerospace. There's no set date for when the vehicle will come into operation, but hopefully it works. And that is our show for you tonight. I'll be back with you tomorrow night at 11. We'll see you then.